All right, we've made it this far. We've learned how to do some HTML structure, some CSS styling. Now it's time to start programming. We haven't really done much programming so far. We've basically been writing documents that the browser can interpret. But programming is kind of its own beast. Programming is where you write scripts, you write little programs that actually do something that isn't just showing a static document. Things now can change. Things can add together like in a calculator. A calculator won't do anything unless there's a program that tells the computer how to add, how to divide, what numbers to use. So programming is going to be all about that. Now when it comes to the web, we use JavaScript. That has kind of been the decided thing for a long time. It's a language with some interesting history worth looking into if you're a history buff. But at the heart of it, that's what we use online. That's what you're going to be using throughout your web dev career. So you'll become very intimately familiar with this. Now, as a language, it's got its own syntax and its own rules, just like we've run into with HTML and with CSS. And you'll recognize a couple things from that, but it's also very different than that in a lot of ways. A lot of the core concepts that we're going to go over when it comes to learning JavaScript are also going to apply at a very fundamental level to any other programming language out there. All the programming languages out there are going to have things like variables. They're going to have things like functions. They're going to have things like loops and arrays and something like objects. So those terms don't have to mean anything to you yet. We're going to go through them and you're going to see them in action, and we're going to kind of get a basic understanding of what they do or why they're useful. But the nice thing is that wherever you learn your basics of programming, those basics are going to apply across a lot of different languages, whether you're going to use Python or PHP or R or whatever you're going to use. Learning it in JavaScript is just as good as learning it anywhere else. Other than that, the syntax and the language might write them in little bits of different ways. Now, we do have to be reasonably precise with our syntax, sort of like CSS. JavaScript has a little bit of looseness there. You can sometimes leave out a semicolon, sometimes not. But just like we saw in HTML, sometimes there's unexpected effects if you do that. So in general, you're going to want to try to follow the rules as much as you can, and only over time will you get good at spotting missing semicolons or, somewhere you used a space when you should have used an underscore. At the start, it's very hard to see that until you get really used to seeing it. It's a bit like being able to find a problem in spelling when you don't really know English. You can't even identify which words are spelled right or wrong anyway, so how are you going to find an error? Same thing's going to apply here. It's going to take some time for you to get really familiar to the point where you just see an error, especially at the speed that you might find that I find them. Obviously, I have a lot more experience here. So the point when it comes to programming, and the point of why we write programs, is generally a good way to think about this is that we're trying to get the computer to do things that we could do, but are kind of tedious or repetitive for us. So a computer is much faster than a human, but it can't do things like a human can do. Computers are only just starting now to learn how to make things like emotional art or write songs. But a computer has been able to add for many, many years now. For a long, long time, computers have been able to add numbers together. So certain things that we do as humans are very repetitive and can be turned into a step-by-step process that can be followed by a computer. And that's basically what we're doing when we're programming. We're creating a step-by-step process that the computer can logically follow to do one thing, do the next thing, add this together, and give me the answer. That's going to be the fundamentals of what we're doing. So when you're programming, and as you start to think of what you could build, you're always looking for those things that are repetitive, that people are doing over and over again and are a little bit mindless, that aren't things that take really, really strong concentration or a creative or emotional element. Things like pasting stuff into spreadsheets that can be programmed, spell checking. We have a huge dictionary of words that we can use and run it over every single word and figure out which ones are wrong and underline them with a little red line. So anyway, that's really just a broad structural outlook. So we're going to need to go over a few basics, but I want to do them in the context of actually writing the program for this calculator, because I find it's very hard to understand these concepts in a completely abstract manner. So starting off, we're going to start writing a little bit of code, and we're going to go right into what I think are some of the most useful things to get to learn right out the gate. So there's a special HTML element that's called script that we can use later. Just like the CSS, we're going to break the JavaScript out into its own file, but for now we don't need to do that. Okay, so to start, we're going to write a comment. We looked at comments a little bit in the last episodes, but with JavaScript, we write them either with double slashes or the same way we did in CSS. You don't really have to worry about that. Double slash is fine. And a comment is going to be something that you're telling the computer, don't look at this. This is for the humans. And we're going to just write testing the console, learning basic syntax. And this is going to help us stay organized with our code over time. So the first little command we're going to learn is console logging. So we are going to console log the word hello, and we're going to put that semicolon at the end, and that's our little bit of syntax. We have this console.log, and then in parentheses, we are telling it to output hello, and we have to put the hello in quotation marks like that. So how are we going to test if this is working? What we're going to do is we're going to open the calculator in a new window, and oh, you can see our layout got a little screwed up here because it's not in the same thing as this. So that would be a bug that we want to fix, but we're going to leave that for now. We're going to inspect this, and we're going to see what happens if we reload now after we save this and reload. And we see here in our dev tools, there's a thing that says hello. So this is what's called the console. It says it right here, console. So when you tell JavaScript to console log, it will console log some information here. So that's just a really useful thing to use. You will use it all the time. And just to write a couple different ways we can write things, we can also write it like this. With single quotation marks, JavaScript will recognize this as the same thing, which is pretty cool. Now we can also write it as console.log, another hello, and leave out the last semicolon, and it will still work. Let's see if this all shows up. We have 3 different console logs. We reload this page, look at the dev tools, and here it is, hello, hello to, and another hello. They all worked. I'm also, I'm not inspecting this every time. There's a keyboard shortcut that I have to open this, so if you see me open this really quickly some ways, opening it with the inspect thing is just fine as well. Anyway, you can see it console logs this stuff. Okay, that's great. That teaches us a little bit about syntax. There's stuff about quotation marks. We can change it. You can see that this actually automatically changed it back to double quotation marks, which is not necessary. Let's say I had a single quotation mark. I'm using the single quotation marks, and I want to output a double quotation mark inside that. That's why we might want to use these singles. Anyway, that's confusing. We don't need to get into it, but I saw that it automatically changed it. And you should know you don't have to use the double quotation marks. Now, okay, we have parentheses here. We're going to be using things like curly braces, the brackets that we used in CSS. We're going to be using equal signs. There's a period here that's used for some reason. We're going to get into all that. Things like case matter. If we do console.log, that's not going to work for us. That's going to break. Now, if we try doing that, and then we reload this page and open it, it's going to give us an error, uncaught reference error. Console is not defined. It's saying, hey, you told me console, but I don't know what that is. Whereas this one is built into the browser. It's built into JavaScript so that it knows, oh, console. I have a thing that's called console, and it has a thing called log. I'm going to do that. Okay, so that's it for our first lesson. We just wanted to open up the script tag, wanted to tell you a little bit about programming in a general way, and just start off with some very basic syntax. So next we're going to get into functions, and we're going to write a first function, and we're just going to dive right in. So see you there.